So for years now, the Warburton Pete has been the primary example of a personal embouchure training device. Not only have I been using the Pete for a long period of time now, but also I did a whole video review about it and talked about some of its use cases and the strengths of the product. But recently on Amazon, I've had some pretenders, some budget options, some would call them knockoffs, popping up in my recommended. So after a couple uses, here are my thoughts and whether or not I think you should go with this budget option over the legitimate Pete. What's going on, everybody? Aaron here, helping musicians get better, faster. And yeah, so I bought two of these budget embouchure training devices. Now, if you don't know what a Pete is, I'm not going to go into exactly what it is in this video. You can check out my other video about that. But for the most part, in the right hands, it can be used to really help you maintain your embouchure and train it a little bit, especially with high range and flexibility. It's not going to teach you scales or how to play Carnival Venice or anything like that, but it can help you maintain, that's for sure. I'll use it when I'm traveling or when I'm really busy. It's not an everyday tool for me, but I do think it's something that is useful for a lot of people. But that said, it can be kind of pricey for essentially an inch and a half, 2 inches of metal. So when I saw an option that was for $10 or less, I was like, it's probably not going to be as good, but it might be a great option for people who can't pony up the 50 bucks. So the two that I purchased, one of them is by a brand called QJ Solar. They actually don't give a name in the brand description. You have to look at it on the description on Amazon. And that is the one that is about $8. And then the other one I got is by Jiayu, I guess is how you're going to say that. And that one is going to be around $10. Now, that said, the only difference between one and the other is this little divot on the top of the device. Otherwise, they're almost the exact same. So what's funny is the one that actually I think has the least amount of metal, which is a negligible amount, but that happens to be the cheaper one. Otherwise, they're both kind of just stainless steel. I don't think they're made out of anything different necessarily. They're just both made in China. Whereas, of course, the Warburton Pete is made here in the United States. So then you run into build quality differences. What are the big differences between the actual Pete and its knockoffs? Well, the first thing that I definitely noticed was the disc at the bottom of the device. It's hard to tell, but the disc for the knockoff version is actually way sharper and thinner than the Pete version, which actually played a huge part into the effectiveness of the device. Essentially, it was just way less comfortable after prolonged use. I'm saying, like, once you got to your third rep, if you're doing the thing where you're pulling it for a few seconds and then letting yourself rest and doing that again, it got way less comfortable. And I think your risk for cutting the interior of your lip is way higher. Whereas, of course, the Pete is just comfortable. It feels like I think it should. Now, when it comes to the curvature side, the Pete is definitely going to be a little bit more thin and narrow, whereas the knockoffs were both a little bit more chunky. And the knockoffs seem to be a lot more drastic in their dip. So it was almost more circular. It's not an exact circle, but that's how it feels. Now, how that affected the exercise was pretty negligible, honestly. You can't really tell the difference between the two. It's noticeable at first, but also keep in mind, I've been using the Pete for more than a decade, whereas these devices, I gave them a couple goes. But the effectiveness of that exercise was just fine for both. And the other weird thing, and I don't know if it plays a part in anything, but there's no plastic topper on top of the budget options. It makes it look better. I don't know if it changes weight or anything like that, but it's not present in the budget options. So there's that. Now, there was a build quality problem that does affect the exercises, and that's these little rubber rings right here that is actually your grip when you're doing these exercises. The legitimate Pete, they are in there. They're not going anywhere. I maybe could remove them if I really tried. However, on the budget devices, not only were they easy to remove, but they flat out were hard to keep to stay on there. So when you went to go do, especially the disc exercise, they would just fall right off, which means you have to hold the device where it wasn't intended to be held, which can affect the effectiveness of the exercise. Those little stoppers, not only did they just fall off easy, they were hard to just keep on there in general. When I took the first one out of the package, they already were falling off just with that little bit of motion. So is it worth adding another $40 from a $10 knockoff to get a legitimate Pete? In my opinion, yes, absolutely. I would still stick with the actual Warburton Pete over any of these knockoffs that you're going to get. I have had this thing for 12 years now, this particular Pete, and it is just like the day I bought it, except for it's a little tarnished. Now, do I think these don't have longevity and aren't going to hold up? No, they're metal. I don't think anything wrong is going to happen with them. I do think they're probably going to chip. They're probably going to scratch a little bit easier than an actual Pete if you throw it into, like, you know, your bag or something like that. But there's also factors like those little rubber grips falling off. You're going to lose them eventually, especially if you're traveling with this thing, which is, for me, that's my primary use case for the Pete. But that said, is the legitimate Pete leagues better than the knockoff? Not necessarily. It is better. It is a better build quality. I think the proportions are way better on the actual Pete. If you can spend the extra amount of money, I would go for it. But if that extra amount of money is going to stop you from being able to get a device like this, then the budget option will be fine. And that's who I think these devices are meant for, is that person who $50 is just a lot for you at this moment, and you're not going to be able to get a device like this unless you go the budget route. And the other person I think who would do really well with this is somebody who's a little bit skeptical on the embouchure training device situation, and you want to try it out a little bit first before you pony up bigger money for a better quality make. Then I think these are for you. Now, do I think there is any difference whatsoever between any of these budget brands? Between the two I got, they're almost the exact same thing other than a little chunk of metal being taken off the top. So you might as well go for the cheapest one. Now, that said, if you know you want to have this thing for a while, you're going to use it on a regular basis, and you want to support a more local company that's a real legitimate music company, then yeah, you absolutely need to go with the Warburton Pete, the legitimate one. So yeah, that's my compare and contrast of these devices. I'm going to stick to my Pete for now, but I guess I have the budget options for maybe a student or something like that. I don't know. But if you made it this far into the video and you found this video helpful, please hit that like button. And if you haven't done so already, go ahead and click that subscribe button to get more videos like this one directly to you. I'm also streaming on a regular basis, and that includes doing group community masterclasses. So if that's something you're interested in, make sure you have those notifications on as well. But again, I'm Aaron, reminding you to be happy, never satisfied. I'll see you in the next one.